Hey, Mount Pleasant, how we doing? Come on. Yeah. It is so good to be back with you. I ducked out for a couple of weeks. My anniversary was in June, and it's summertime. Kids are home, and who goes away when their kids are home, right? So we waited for the kids to go back to school, and then we left. And so I had a great couple of weeks away with my wife. I highly suggest, if you are married, to make that part of your core rhythm. I told our kids a long time ago, I love their mother more than I love them. And I'm going to give her a week every year. And I have tried to hold to that, and just a little bit of marriage advice, but something that has been incredible for our relationship. Well, this morning, we're continuing in our series, Rotten, in a culture of brokenness, bear something better. And we've been looking at the fruit of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Galatians, and how if we are truly followers of Jesus, if we have the Spirit of God living in us, then this is the fruit that should be being produced in our life. And today I want to look at the fruit called kindness. Now, kindness is kind of interesting because it's one of the most misunderstood, and I would argue watered down words in our entire culture, if you really think about it. We slap the word kindness on coffee mugs and on t-shirts. Just be kind, right? We hashtag it when tragedy hits our culture. We plaster it on yard signs right next to venomous political rants. But let's be honest, a lot of us, what we call kindness is actually, I would make the argument, fake fruit. It's rotten underneath. It's be nice if you agree with me. It's say the right things online, but maybe be different at home. It's do random acts of kindness so people notice, but not because it really costs us anything, but we want the world around us to see that we do nice things. Well, truthfully, that's not kindness, that's actually niceness. And those are very different. See, niceness is surface, it's safe, and oftentimes it's self-serving. I'll give you an example. Several years back, I was at a four-way stop back when we lived in Ohio, and it was my turn to go, but I waved the person to the right of me on through, and it was a truck with a trailer on it, and I was just being nice. Well, the individual to my left obviously did not like my kindness, and he blows through the four-way, slams on his horn, and flips me off as he's driving through, which is all fair and good, except for the fact that it was an individual from the church that I pastored. No kidding, true story. So what's interesting is apparently they were in a hurry, right? They had no idea who I was. Oh, but I knew who they were, right? And what's interesting, and the kicker is that not only was it somebody in our church, but it was actually somebody who was highly involved in volunteering on our teams. Now hear me, think about this for a moment. Be kind on Sunday, flip me off on Monday. See, that's what happens when we settle for rotten kindness, when we play it one way over here, but we live it out a completely different way over here. See, we start to believe that we're bearing fruit when in reality, we're just zip tying apples to dead trees. And if we're not careful, that's how we can end up. And it might look good from a distance, but is it real? Is there something really happening in us? Yet every once in a while, when the world is full of fake fruit, we catch a glimpse of something real. And it brings a smile to our face. I want to show you a picture here. This is a picture of Ebony Nene Williams. This was taken back in 2018. She was working the morning shift at Waffle House in Lamarque, Texas. Now, I don't know if you like Waffle House or not. I do. And Waffle House on a Saturday is a slammed experience. People everywhere wanting orders, the cooks banging out orders as fast as they can. And for this young woman, life wasn't easy. She was saving every dollar in tip that she had earned because she was trying to put herself through college. And that morning, again, the place was slammed. Orders were stacking up. People were waiting. They were waiting in line out the door. And one of her regulars, an elderly man by the name of Adrian, came in with his oxygen tank in tow. His hands were weak that morning, and he couldn't manage to cut his food. Now, most of the people there would have just looked at him, maybe felt bad in the moment, and then moved on. But Ebony stopped. She stopped what she was doing. She stopped taking orders. She stopped delivering food to tables. She picked up Adrian's plate and she took his knife and she began to cut his ham. Nothing dramatic, nothing for show. She just saw a need and she met it. However, somebody else in the restaurant saw this whole thing shake out. They grabbed their phone, they snapped a photo, this one right here, and posted it online. Of course, in our social media-driven world, this photo goes viral. And as the story goes, she ends up winning a $16,000 scholarship. The mayor of the town declared a day to honor her. But when reporters interviewed her, this is what she simply said, and I love her response. "I didn't think anyone's seen it," she said. "It was just little old me going about my day." It's just little old me going about my day, doing random acts of kindness. See, that's the difference. No spotlight, no look at me, just costly kindness that looks like Jesus. And listen, I'm not against her getting recognition. I think she absolutely deserved it. But doesn't it tell us something? It tells us something that really ought to stop us in our tracks. The reason her story exploded wasn't because kindness is so common. Her story exploded because kindness is so rare. And that should wake us up to the world in which we live. See, because what she did was not surface niceness. It was not fake fruit. What she did was give us an example of what I'm talking about today, the kindness that the Spirit of God grows in us. The Apostle Paul knew this. That's why in Galatians 5, he included kindness in the list of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. He puts kindness in there. Why? Now, he's talking about not the zip-tied kind, but the Spirit-shaped kind, and that's really what we're going to address today, because the Spirit of God grows a different kindness in us. We really are locked into a relationship with him. If the Spirit of God really is living in us, then something should be different in our lives. See, one shows up when it's inconvenient. That's the kind of kindness we're talking about. The one that steps into the mess that no one else around you wants to touch. The one that doesn't need credit because it points back to Jesus. It's really not about you, and you realize that. Now, I want to be real with you. This is where a lot of us, me included, wrestle, because Spirit-driven kindness actually doesn't come naturally. It's not a natural part of our broken self. We're self-absorbed at a broken level. It's not soft, it's not cheap, and it's not about us. It actually cuts against the grain of everything that culture teaches and says. So the question today isn't, am I a nice person? I think we could all make that argument. The real question today, and the one that I hope we can wrestle with at a deep level, is, am I letting the Spirit of God grow a kindness in me that looks like Jesus? Because that's very different than being a nice person. Do I look more and more like Jesus every day, and do I live by the example that he gives? Now, here's what I want to do today. We're going to kind of peel back the layers of kindness, and not the watered-down version that we see in our world, but the Spirit-driven kind, the kind that Jesus models. I want to give three sort of hard-hitting truths, three realities of what it means to live like Jesus lives, the kind of kindness that he calls us to live by. The thing that cuts against everything that culture tells us, and honestly, what most of us want, if we're going to be really honest with ourselves, because these aren't feel-good ideas. They're gut-level realities that we all have to wrestle with. If you let them, they'll mess with you, but they'll mess with you in all the right ways. See, because they're not about acting nicer. They're about letting the Spirit of God mold and shape us into who God ultimately created us to be. The first reality is this: culture says be nice if it benefits you, but Jesus says something different. He says be kind even when it costs you. So it's not just about benefiting ourselves, but it's actually a cost to us in the day in and day out reality. See, here's the thing about kindness. You can't schedule it. You can't pencil it in. You can't make it happen between Starbucks and picking your kids up at soccer practice. It's just not the way it works. Real kindness almost always is an interruption to our plans and our schedules and our wants and our needs and our desires. And that's exactly where we find Jesus today in the account that I want to look at. If you've got your Bibles or you're following along in our app, get to Luke chapter 8. Luke chapter 8, Jesus is in the middle of a crowd. People are pulling him in every direction. His day is already slammed full with appointments. He's a busy guy. And in the middle of this chaos, a desperate father shows up on the scene. His name is Jairus. Now, he's a respected synagogue leader, and that's important to part of this story. But none of this at this moment matters because Jairus has a daughter who's 12 years old who's dying at home. So he goes and he finds Jesus and he falls at Jesus' feet. And this is how the interaction happens in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 42. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. He's pleading with Jesus. His daughter is on death's doorstep. Now, Jesus has got crowds pressing in on him, people pulling him at every which direction, voices shouting his name. The demands of his time are endless, and I think we can all agree that the one person who could have an excuse to say, hey, I just don't have enough time for this is Jesus, because he's got so many other things on his plate. But then Jairus, this desperate father, throws himself at Jesus' feet. And the very next words we read in verse 42 is Jesus' response. Jesus went with him, and he was surrounded, there it is, he was surrounded by the crowds. He went with him, and he was surrounded by the crowd. See, Jesus is going one direction. A man engages with him. He's desperate for Jesus' help. And Jesus stops what he's doing, and he begins to go in a different direction. He stops what he's doing. He stops his plans, whatever it was that he was doing. And see, that's spirit-led kindness. And here's the truth of the matter. Real kindness will always cost you something. Real kindness will cost you. It will cost you a moment in your busy day. It will cost you time that you really maybe don't want to spend. Maybe it'll cost you to stop and listen when you've got somewhere else to be. It might cost you comfort stepping into someone else's pain when you'd rather keep it light and not have to engage at that level. It will cost you control. Any control freaks in the room? Letting God interrupt your schedule because there's someone on God's schedule that's not on your schedule. And he wants to use you in a mighty and powerful way. And let's be honest, when we get interrupted, we don't love that. See, we like kindness as long as it's convenient, as long as it fits into the nice little box that we can schedule in our day and do the things that we want to do. But Jesus shows us something very different. Jesus actually shows us that spirit-grown kindness isn't convenient. It never will be. It will be difficult. Let me give you some real-world examples of what I'm talking about in marriage, for instance. Kindness looks like washing the dishes when you're exhausted and you've been at work all day and your kids are at home and you want somebody else to do it, and truth be told, you just want to sit on the couch and veg. But you do it not because you want applause, but because love costs something. Or at work, kindness looks like actually helping the coworker who everyone else gets annoyed with because that individual slows progress down in your office, and instead of rolling your eyes, you now engage. In parenting, kindness looks like putting the phone down and entering your kids' world even though you're tired and you just want to binge watch something on Netflix. How about online kindness? Online kindness looks like pausing before you type that sarcastic comment because you don't agree with that person politically or the crazy response that they've put online, because truthfully, tearing someone down might feel good in the moment. But it's really not what's good. It actually rots the fruit in your life that the Spirit is trying to grow. How about at church? Kindness looks like walking across the lobby to introduce yourself to someone instead of going to the place that you always sit with the people that you always know because you know it's comfortable. So here's the question that, again, we need to be wrestling with when we're talking about kindness. When was the last time kindness actually cost me something? When did it inconvenience me? When did it make me go above and beyond and out of my way? For Jesus, this just wasn't one interruption. It wasn't just one desperate need. Actually, on the way to help Jairus, he gets interrupted again, but this time he gets interrupted by someone very different. Someone in the crowd that was often overlooked, someone that the law said to avoid, to keep your distance from. See, Jairus, again, was a respected man. He was a ruler in the synagogue, so people knew his name. They knew his status, his influence, his power. So if you were to ask individuals on the street, should you go to Jairus' house, everybody would have said, why? Absolutely, yes, Jesus, this is worth your time. Oh, but the next person, she was completely opposite. She had been bleeding, the Bible tells us, for 12 years, and according to the Jewish law, she was ritually unclean. And when you read that at first glance, you may not fully understand what that means. So let me tell you, it means she couldn't go to the temple to worship. She couldn't be touched by other human beings. She couldn't live in community. I can't imagine for 12 years, I'm not a touchy-feely person, but I can't imagine not having some sort of physical contact with other human beings, to not be able to live in community or with your family. For over a decade, everywhere she went, she was avoided. People whispered. In fact, they crossed the street to get away from her because they didn't want to be inconvenienced with being considered spiritually unclean. See, her sickness wasn't just physical, it was social, and it was also spiritual. And with that, she carried this great weight of shame everywhere she went. And yet this woman who dares to reach out to Jesus, and this is where we see the second reality of spirit-led kindness kick in. See, it doesn't play it safe. It doesn't keep people at arm's length. It actually steps into the world that most people avoid. And here's the reality. Culture says, stay safe, don't get messy. But Jesus says something very different. He says, step into people's pain. Oh, and by the way, call them family. So not just engage for a little bit, but actually engage them and consider them a brother or a sister or a son or a daughter. If you're following along, look with me in verses 43 and 44 of Luke 8. A woman in the crowd was suffering for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could not find a cure. Coming up behind Jesus, so she didn't even call his name out like Jairus, she just snuck up behind him and she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. I want you to think about that for just a moment. She had heard the stories about Jesus. She knew who he was. For 12 years, she was waking up every day in the same pain. She went to doctors and treatments and had failed attempts and disappointment, not to mention all of the shame that I just talked about earlier, which meant, again, she wasn't allowed to worship. She wasn't allowed to touch anyone. She's isolated. She's alone. She's invisible. So what does she do? She doesn't engage Jesus face to face. She sneaks up behind him and she touches his garment. If you read the following verses, Jesus stops dead in his tracks and he asks the question, who is it that touched me? Letting the crowd know that something happened because he knows that she's been healed. But she knows if the wrong person sees what takes place and nothing happens, then this could absolutely devastate her life and she would be forever humiliated. Yet that moment she touches Jesus and she is healed. She probably thinks, good, no one noticed, I can slip away, but Jesus noticed. And he slams the pause button on his busy schedule and he engages with this woman that no one else would engage with. See, Jesus won't let her hide. In fact, he has a conversation with her. Again, in verses 47 and 48, when the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell on her knees in front of him. Because again, she's been humiliated so many times, she thinks this is just going to happen one more time. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. And then Jesus says these incredibly powerful words, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. It's interesting. This woman, up to this point, was nameless. She was a bleeding, unclean woman who could not engage with other people. And in this moment, Jesus stops, draws attention to her, and calls her daughter. See, that's what spirit kindness does. It doesn't stop at quick fixes. It has to restore. It ultimately has to rename. It has to pull people back into the thing that God created us for, which is community and to be connected with others. So it begs the question, what does that look like for us? It looks like sitting with the kid at school or the teenager in your youth group who eats alone or stands off by themselves. It looks like showing up with for a friend who has an addiction issue, not to judge them or to add extra pressure, but to just have a presence reminding them that they are more than their failures and that they can overcome whatever it is that they're dealing with. It's like looking at your son or your daughter in the eye when they've completely blown it and reminding them that this mistake that they've made doesn't have to define them for the rest of their life. Because here's the truth. Spirit-filled kindness doesn't play it safe and it doesn't stay comfortable. It goes to where people are and it gets into the mess. It doesn't avoid those things. And it says what Jesus says, that we can call them family, a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister. And see, while Jesus is still speaking these things over her and she has had this miraculous healing, the unthinkable happens. A messenger shoves through the crowd to find Jairus, and he delivers the gut punch that this man was not ready for. In fact, if we look at verse 49, it says, he says, your daughter is dead. There's no use in troubling the teacher now. Isn't that just typical of us? It's like, hey, go to Jesus, he can heal her. Okay, Jesus didn't get there in time, so let's just not bother him anymore because it's all said and done. Sorry, buddy, it's just not gonna work out for you. Now, can you imagine being Jairus for that moment? 1 second, he's clinging to hope. The very next moment, he's crushed by despair. And the crowd, they're ready to write the whole thing off. It's too late, game's done, she's gone. It's interesting, though, Jesus doesn't flinch. He doesn't absorb any of the fear. He doesn't collapse under pressure. He looks at Jairus very calmly, I find, as I read this, and he says, don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed. I want to pause there for a minute. He's just been delivered the message that his daughter's dead. Jesus just sort of patiently and flippantly says, hey, don't worry, she's gonna be fine. Which leads to the third reality of this spirit-filled kindness that I want us to look at this morning, and that is culture says, make it about what you can do, but Jesus says, no, make it about what God can do. Because what God can do is beyond what we can do. And oftentimes we're not comfortable with that. We're not comfortable with allowing God to do what only he can do. Let's be honest, most of us hit a wall right here when things look dead. Let's bring it home, let's make it personal. When things look dead in our marriage or in our family, when things look dead in our career or in our faith, we shut the book and we just call it too late. And then we try to find something else to move on to. And if we're being real, we don't usually say God can. What we usually say is, I can't. You ever find yourself in those moments? You don't go to God first and go, God can do this. Instead, it's what I can or can't do. Yet spirit-filled kindness doesn't stop at I can't. It keeps leaning into what God can. When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in except him, except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, stop weeping. She isn't dead. She is only asleep. Again, Jesus has been gone. He's just shown up on the scene. He has not even seen her yet. These people are in the home. They've seen her. They've touched her. They know that she's dead. And here's the typical human reaction. But the crowd laughed at him because they knew that she had died. Typical, right? Oh man, you have no idea what you're talking about. Then Jesus took her by the hand and he said in a loud voice, my child, get up. And at that moment, her life returned and she immediately stood up. Again, the crowd laughed at him. At some level, they mocked him. Truthfully, they thought he was crazy. But see, spirit-filled kindness doesn't bow to the laughter of the crowd. It points back to the power of God. Even when everybody else sees the impossible, and that's, I think, where it should be very real for us as followers of Jesus, because most of us are fine with kindness when it's small, holding the door for someone at a grocery store, sending a text message when someone's having a bad day, buying someone a $5 cup of coffee, if you can even find that these days. But what about when it's beyond you? What about when it's something you can't fix? That there's not enough money, that there's not enough talent, that there's not enough skill, there's not enough connection. What about when it's dead? When the bitterness in your family is so deep that no amount of being nice can fix it. When division in our culture is so toxic that kindness feels like bringing a squirt gun to a wildfire. When someone has hurt you so deeply that forgiveness feels impossible. And every instinct in your ever being wants to lash back and not lean into God. When the weight of depression or shame or regret in someone's life feels so heavy that you realize you're not going to be able to fix this. See, I think that's where spirit kindness draws a line in the sand and says, this isn't about me anymore. This is about what God can do, and only He can do. And He may do it through us, but truth is, it's He and He alone that can do it. Think about it this way. Because kindness in your strength will always run out, but kindness rooted in Jesus points beyond you to the only one who can bring dead things back to life. That's what Jesus is in the business of doing, is bringing dead things back to life. See, and here's the challenge that we all wrestle with, and all of us wrestle with this at some level, and the challenge is simply this: what's dead around you right now? Where have you thrown up your hands and said, it's just too far gone? I want you to think about that for just a moment. I want you to get that in your head and in your heart. Is it a relationship? Is it your marriage? Is it a prodigal child? Is it faith? Is it your own heart? See, the crowd may laugh. Culture may tell us not to bother. It's just too late. But Jesus says, don't be afraid. Still believe. See, that's the difference between niceness and spirit-filled kindness. Niceness quits when it gets hard, but spirit-filled kindness leans heavy into Jesus and says, God, I can't do this on my own, but do what only you can do. And give me the faith and the strength to walk with you. And see, here's the hard truth. Leaning into Jesus at this point is probably the most difficult. Because here's what it means. It means that we have to give up control. It means that it's no longer in that little box that I talked about. It means trusting Him when everything in you screams, to fight back, to run away, to shut down, to run. That's why Paul writes these incredible words in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in your weakness. I love that. My power works best in your weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, Paul says, so that the power of Christ can do what? Can work through me. It's no longer about what I do, but it's about what God does through me. In other words, you don't have to muscle this thing up. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You just have to let go and to trust God. In fact, if you look at John chapter 15, verse 5, Jesus says these words. He says, yes, I am the vine, and we are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce what? Much fruit, right? Much fruit. Part of what he's talking about there is this fruit of the Spirit. There's much that can be grown in us. But if we are apart from Him, if we get severed from that vine, then we will do nothing. Because again, it's about what God can do. I love that. I don't know if you caught it or not, but he said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Not real kindness. No spiritual fruit can last on your own. It will run out. But if we stay connected to Him, the Spirit grows something in us that the world cannot explain. And here's the thing that we get to kind of wrestle around with. Where are you still trying to do this in your own strength? I think that's a question we should be asking on a daily basis. What is it in our life that is that needs God's attention, and where is it that we're trying to take control of it? Where are you zip tying apples on dead trees, hoping that nobody notices? Where do you need to stop pretending and start surrendering? Because here's what I know, Spirit-filled kindness isn't fluff, it isn't weak. Instead, it's costly, it's gritty, it restores the forgotten, and it points God to who raises the dead. So let's land the plane this morning. If all we do is walk out of here today and we just try to be nicer, then I think we've missed what God's trying to get at. Again, niceness is ultimately fake fruit. The call today is gut level, it's spirit driven. And I want us to own something here. Some of us, if we're honest at a gut level, we're just exhausted trying to manufacture kindness on our own. And maybe we've not been able to put our finger on it and we've maybe not been able to identify it, but truth is, we're just trying to manufacture this on our own. And hear me, it shows. Your patience runs out, the bitterness leaks out, the sarcasm slips out, and oftentimes we excuse it off of, oh, that's just their personality or that's just who I am, but Jesus didn't come just to polish you up to make you look nice on the outside. He came to make you new from the inside out, to give you a new heart that actually produces something real and valuable. In fact, Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 2, verse 4. He says, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? That is some of the most powerful words in all of the New Testament. I'm reminded often in my prayer life that God is incredibly patient with me, and I am so thankful for that. Does this mean nothing to you, Paul asks? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? He's showing us by example what it means to be patient. Because see, that's the gospel message. God didn't just feel bad for you. He just didn't wave you through the four-way stop of life. He saw you. He saw you stuck and unclean. He saw you cut off and spiritually dead. And in his kindness, he came for you. He sent his son to a cross to die a brutal, horrible death, so you could come to understand what grace and mercy is, and you could be called sons and daughters of the Most High God. And here's the crazy thing. That same spirit, when we engage in a relationship with him, lives in us. So now we don't have to fake nice. It's so we can reflect the kindness of Jesus in a world that is starving for the real thing. So here's the question that none of us can dodge today as we wrap up, and that is this. Will I settle for counterfeit kindness, or will I surrender to the Spirit and let him grow the real thing in me? And maybe that's exactly what your home, your marriage, your friendships, your workplace, your neighborhood is starving for. Not surface niceness, not be kind slogans, but the real thing. And my prayer today is that we live that kindness that the world can't ignore. Not because we're good, but because Jesus has been kind to us. And I think so many times we forget how good he is to us. This morning, before I dismiss, I just want to let you know our prayer team is available. If there's someone who is here today and is wondering about this relationship with Jesus and what it's all about, they're going to be right out in the room, right to the right, if you walk through these doors. And they would love to talk to you and help you wrestle with some of these things. Or maybe today you really are faking it, and you're at the end of it, and you just don't know what to do next. Here's what I love about the church. We have a group of people that aren't here to judge or aren't here to point fingers. They're just simply here to pray for you and to walk with you. Some of our prayer team will be in there if you would want someone to pray for you. This morning, I'm simply going to close with a prayer, and then I'm going to dismiss. My challenge today is that we would wrestle with this at a deep level. The kindness of our Father is very different than the niceness of our world. And that we could be reflections of him and how we live, because we're allowing him to do the work in us and through us that the world cannot ignore. Father God in heaven, we love you and thank you for the life that you have given each and every one of us. And God, as we read earlier, we are so thankful that you are patient. And we are so thankful that you are kind. We're so thankful that you meet us in our mess, yet God, you don't want us to stay there. Father, if there's anyone in this room this morning that is at the end of their rope, I just pray that they will lean into what we talked about today. That it's not about doing this on our own strength and in our own grit, but it's about leaning into you. It's staying connected to the vine so something real can be grown in us. It's not easy, it takes time, but you are patient. God, as we leave this place, may the communities that we live in, the neighborhoods, the people that we do life with, the places that we go to work, they'll see something different in us because we're leaning into you and we want something better, something deeper, something richer. Yet at the same time, God, prepare our hearts because it's going to cost us time. It's going to cost us resources and energy because when we begin to live for you and this spirit-filled kindness begins to ooze out of us, it's not always on our schedule and on our time frame. So God, not only make us aware, but give us a heart to step into the inconvenient. And not to be bitter about it, but to be thankful that you have used us, resourced us, and given us the opportunity to maybe change someone else's life for your sake and for your glory. We ask all of this in your Son's most holy and precious name, and we all said together, amen. Have a great morning.